Okay, so I'd like to introduce Don Miller, and I'll let you introduce yourself, and you can clip this somewhere. And
Good. Yeah, I'll just say a few words to along the way to introduce myself, I guess. Maybe first. First, I'm flattered and honored to be here at the Altakal Audubon Society meeting. I love being mistaken for a botanist. Sometimes I get lucky, and Northern California botanists invite me to say something. I'm actually an entomologist. I'm also flattered to be mistaken for an ornithologist. I mean, the flattery is just as good. So thank you so much. And I am sorry that Jared, and he's the one who approached me, couldn't be here, but I hope he recovers soon. I also want to acknowledge that, in fact, I think we even had a date to do some butterfly watching in Colby Meadows, if I remember correctly. And this was supposed to take place in August, but various events ensued, and so it didn't, basically. So, but Jared did ask me, he said, would you mind coming to speak? I certainly not. If I have a captive audience, I'm always happy to try to entertain them. I'll say a few words about my background. First, my position, I guess. I'm at Chico State Biological Sciences, and I'm the entomologist there. And I've been there, I guess, 22 years. And my predecessor, some of you may remember, Dave Kistner. Dave Kistner was there between 1959 and 1999. And he built up quite a program and quite a collection. And I'm very excited to share some of that collection with you tonight as I discuss some of these focal butterfly species that I think are quite interesting um, to look at. Thank you, Ken.
you're a little taller.
Am I totally out of view?
Taller than Karen's.
Am I taller than Karen's? Am I? Okay. So anyway, that's where I am. Um, I'll just say a few more words, maybe. I think I want to acknowledge my kindergarten teacher. I'll go way back to September 1966. I didn't much like her, and I was a problem kid who wouldn't sleep when we were supposed to be taking our naps. So I remember very well that Miss Solomon shoved me underneath her desk so she could keep an eye on me because we were supposed to lie still, and I couldn't do that. I would scoot around and it was constantly causing trouble. But all was made well when in September she took us out behind the schoolyard, and this is upstate New York. And I remember very well that New England asters were in full bloom. And then there were these monarch butterflies moving through, and I was completely taken with them. And I asked, where are they? What's going to happen? Where are they going? And she said, they're going to migrate south. And I thought, we should all do that. It sounded absolutely lovely. So I want to acknowledge Miss Solomon for showing me butterflies. So I've been looking at butterflies for, well, 58 years plus, I guess a little while now. So I love to bring this here to share with you. This is also a sneaky way to try to recruit people who are already really good with binoculars and their eyes to come and watch not just birds, but also butterflies. Because, right, John? I'll acknowledge John All. He and I run annually a, don't laugh, 4th of July butterfly count. Not Christmas, but 4th of July butterfly count. And we do this at the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve. And we've been doing it now formally since 2008. So I'm going to share with you all some of those results, I think, to highlight my message about conservation and citizen engagement and just appreciating butterflies. I do have a slideshow, and there will be scenes from the butterfly count itself and also some of the featured species that I think are worth highlighting. And I have another message that actually comes from a well-respected journal called Science Magazine, whereby some of our data actually was put to use, put to work to help document the case for disappearing or vanishing butterflies. So I want to do all of those things. I have this very vague 3-word title, Monitoring Butterfly Populations. I guess that'll work. And this is an actual photograph of one of our 4th of July butterfly counters. I guess her name is Lisa Sorensen. My student, Clara Buchholz, took that. And of course, she's being visited by a mourning cloak. I'll just mention it because only yesterday, this doesn't happen often, I saw a mourning cloak flying through Chico, and it's very exciting to see those kinds of things. So this is iconic. Maybe like a yellow shafted flicker. Was that what? A little bit, yeah. All right, good. I imagine people are familiar with the New Yorker and Elizabeth Colbert. So I'll take the liberty of passing around her fairly recent article, uh, Bugs in the System by Elizabeth Colbert. Some of you may already have seen that by Elizabeth Colbert. So the fate of the world's insects, has captured her attention, and she writes so beautifully. I strongly recommend it, even as it's going around. Bugs in the system. This goes back a few years now. Insects are the largest class of animals on the planet. What will their decline mean for the rest of us? She writes. Okay, and I'm bringing something else, and this is a little bit more scientific. This is actually the title of an article published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. So that's a fairly prestigious journal. And the title of this article is Insect Decline in the Anthropocene, Death by 1,000 Cuts. And the lead author is David Wagner, as you can see here. And here's another iconic species. This is a regal fritillary, which has had a tremendous decline, especially in the East and the Midwest. It's virtually disappeared from many of its former haunts, habitats, which were at least historically tall grass prairie. And I want to say that our grasslands in America have suffered as much as any other ecosystem, much of them being converted to intensive agriculture. And I want to highlight, in particular, in the tall grass prairie, say of Illinois and Iowa, much of this has been converted to animal agriculture, especially forage for livestock, namely soybeans and corn. We don't eat that stuff. Most of it gets fed to animals or gets turned into industrial food products. I want to acknowledge that. So the regal fritillary is one of many casualties in this regard. Right, just to continue with a few more elements from this article, The Global Decline of Insects. Again, names that you may or may not recognize. This includes articles by Peter Raven, who's a very well-known botanist, Matt Forrester, David Wagner, May Berenbaum, and many more. Death by 1,000 cuts suggests, I think people are familiar with the phrase, that there's no single cause or silver bullet, if you will, to explain a decline in insects. It's more like many things that cumulatively exert their negative effects and just bring the populations down. Not all of them, but many of them, including habitat loss is a very big one. I already mentioned intensive agriculture, rampant and uncritical use of insecticides, including in urban and suburban situations. And of course, behind it all, the juggernaut of climate change, which is something of a wild card that's a little hard to predict. What have I done in the past? Well, among other things, besides teaching entomology at Chico State, I've had an interest in using butterflies or applying them as indicators of environmental quality. In particular, here's an example. I've pursued bioindicators of primary tropical rainforest. What I've looked at is the species composition and abundance of butterflies in Papua New Guinea. Not all of it, but just a little portion of it, particularly comparing oil palm plantations. I think we're familiar with oil palm. I know it's kind of demonized, not totally fair, against the original tropical rainforest. So what exactly is lost? And I guess I was one of the first to document what precisely was lost when original tropical rainforest is cut and converted into oil palm plantations. Again, most of you are probably familiar with how oil palm or palm oil, more particularly, has taken off as a major ingredient. I think it's overtaken soybean oil even. So as the world's most prevalent vegetable oil, relatively cheap, has a quote, good mouth feel, and is present in ever so many highly processed food products. You don't have to go far to find it. But there are consequences to that. I've given presentations at Friends of the Chico State Herbarium and also at Lepidopterist meetings. Lepidopterists are people who are interested in butterflies and moths. And I guess I've been doing these butterfly counts for, here we go, John, since 1991. So it dates me pretty well. Kentucky, Arizona, and mostly California now. So I was inspired, arriving here in 2002, beginning in 2008, right, John, to organize and launch, if you will, our local version of North American Butterfly Association's 4th of July butterfly count, which I think is probably modeled closely after the Audubon Society's Christmas bird count, which Jennifer just announced. Obviously much younger than that, but a lot of it follows in the same kind of spirit. So really anybody, I think, can participate as long as you're with experienced people who can record which species are being seen, that sort of thing. So these are called NAPA, or North American Butterfly Association counts, and they have taken place at the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve, but also the Butte Creek Ecological Reserve. These are so easy to confuse, and my students, I don't blame them. They're constantly confused. But these are very close by, and they're both little bits of land that have been put aside in some kind of perpetuity. So our efforts produce data that are archived by North American Butterfly Association. And as I was pointing out a little while ago, recently, some of these efforts were actually acknowledged and used in a large scale paper that was trying to actually document general declines of butterflies using numbers and using reliable sources of data. Another theme I'd like to bring into this talk is that of what are called ecotypes. And this also resonates with this whole theme of Anthropocene, this new, if you like, epic, geologic epic, whereby humans have irreversibly modified the planet's surface and even its climate, such that there's a whole new set of rules and situations that are affecting living things. And there even seem to be new forms of living things that are arising. We call an ecotype will be something that's ecologically tuned to a particular kind of an environment, some of it having arisen only in the last century or so. So we're starting to see insects. There's even a new mosquito, I have to admit. It's the London Underground mosquito. Is that right, Jennifer? The London Underground mosquito. So I guess you might have to go to London, England, of course, and find those mosquitoes yourselves if you want to see them. It's about 150 years old, it's thought. So I have a couple of examples of ecotypes I'd like to share with you. One of them, two of them actually occur locally. Certainly, we have moved an awful lot of host plants around in this country. Any number, hundreds of new plants have been introduced to North America, and reverse. If you go to northern Italy, say, for example, I remember so well seeing Robinia pseudoacacia, the familiar North American black locust, going crazy. The Italians don't like it, but there it is. So it's not like it's always just one way. It goes, well, both ways. And so the introduction of novel host plants, these are food for caterpillars, that's what I mean in particular, seems to have promoted the origin of ecotypes or special populations or races of, in this case, butterflies that use those novel host plants they've never experienced in the past. So here are my two examples. One of them is called Papilio azelicaon, or the anise swallowtail, and the other, potentially, Poanis mulane. I'm happy to say I saw one of these just down the street at the intersection of 8th and Forest this very morning. So I'll show you pictures. We'll get to that. I did want to highlight some of the species that we see, and most or all of you have seen this one. This has to be a rock star or poster child of Chico or something like that. Yes, the pipeline swallowtail, of course. Batis philonor, I'll use Latin names. When we do our counts, is this right, John? It tends to be the most abundant species. That's great. It looks as though this local native species is doing rather well. It's extremely specialized. It seems to use only one host plant and one host plant only, Aristolochia californica. And beyond that, we seem to have a distinct race. So I give you a trinomial, Batis philonor hirsuta, to indicate that this race or subspecies has diverged from the rest of the populations on the rest of the continent. And it's mostly restricted to the Sacramento Valley. So it's really special. And it seems to use only the California pipevine. The name hirsuta suggests it's hairy. Maybe it's a little bit hairier than most of them. It's smaller, definitely smaller, and appears to be genetically distinct and geologically quite young, which I think is quite interesting. So there's a photo on the right of an adult visiting Tritolea. I think that's called Ithuriel's spear. I'm not sure if that's a correct photo. What? It's like an it looks to me like an ukao, O-O-K-O-W. I agree. So maybe that Walls of Heaven website was not, maybe I should have corrected it or something like that. But John's right. I think he's right. I'm just showing you little snippets of some of our numbers that we have gotten from our butterfly counts. Again, I'm not sure how the Audubon Society records them. I'm just showing you a few numbers going back to 2008. And this is just the number of mostly adult butterflies we've seen. And you can see they fluctuate, but they're in the hundreds. So they're doing pretty well. Um, and I also have butterflies to pass around. Should I pass them around or not? Maybe at the end. Let's do that. Continuing the swallowtails, I'm going to show you a few of the families of butterfly. And these are the swallowtails. These are the world's largest, if you will, and in many ways, maybe the most spectacular and best known of the butterflies. So another one is called Annie's swallowtail or Papilio zelicaon. And this is where I think it gets interesting. It's historically in this region it used lomatium in the Apiaceae, the carrot family, also known as biscuit root. And that's what it used in only a few allied related plants as larval host plants for the caterpillars. So I'm talking about caterpillar host plants. A lot of these butterflies are very closely tethered to a particular species or family of host plants, and the relationship goes back eons. Okay, that they're chemically strongly associated with certain families of plants. So we appreciate the carrot family has got pretty strong flavor to it and a lot of chemistry. This is what they used historically, but humans being humans, one way or the other, the fennel, the European fennel, Feniculum vulgare, got introduced. I don't know if it was accidental or deliberate, I don't know. But if you go to the coast or the Bay Area or up and down there, you'll see heaps and heaps of it. You can't miss it. Well, the butterflies have not ignored it. It seems as though now there's a new ecotype, which seems to be genetically and biologically distinct, that has specialized on Feniculum vulgare. So it's departed from its traditional diet of lomatium and other native carrot family members. And now it's using fennel, which again, you might realize is extremely abundant. So you might, well, this is good, right? We're promoting the butterfly. That's good, right? Maybe. It also seems to have multiple generations. Locally, when we see it, it's not that common, right, John? And it seems to have one generation only. So this is a new opportunity for a native species of butterfly, it seems. And it's an ecotype. Our citizen counters, if we want to find these butterflies, had better go to the hilltops because it's mostly the males and sometimes the females that tend to fly up to the tops of hills. Takes some real effort. Sentinel Point, if you want to see these things. Sentinel Point in Upper Bidwell Park is a good place to find them in March. Here are some observations of the numbers of Annie's swallowtails we've seen. Again, bouncing around quite a bit. Here's another species I want to nominate as a potential ecotype, but the jury is still out. And this is in a different family called the Hesperiidae or the skippers. The umber skipper, Pointus malleus. This is the one I saw just down the street this morning, this very morning. Historically, again, the populations are thought to be restricted to the interior of California, not along the coast, and they use essentially native grasses. Which grasses exactly, I'm not sure if anybody knows, but that's what they did. Humans being humans, move things around. And here's a grass that's been introduced, Cynodon dactylon, Bermuda grass. I know Bermuda shorts have been introduced, but there's also a grass. And these butterflies, well, great. They seem to have adopted it. So if you're in the Bay Area, these butterflies, I won't say they're weedy, but they're really common and ordinary, and you'll see them all over the place. If you go to the interior, you won't. They're much more restricted. They tend to be much rarer than that. So I want to suggest this might be yet another ecotype, as we saw with the Annie swallowtail, that's in the making, because of our habit of moving species around. There's a picture of the butterfly. Some of you may know John Whittlesey. He's a wonderful photographer, and he's I think he's with Jennifer Jewell, isn't that right, John? Yeah, some of you may know. Anyway, our observations bounce around a bit more here. Here's a species you've probably seen as well, and it seems to be doing very well, especially in the cities, urban and suburban situations. Why is that? Well, I would suggest that humans have planted a lot of ash, fraxinus, a lot of sycamore, a lot of plane trees, and these butterflies can use these as caterpillars, and they do pretty well. So this species, the Western tiger swallowtail, seems to be thriving in urban environments. And again, I think that's kind of good news. On the upper right, you can see a larva I don't know if you can see it, but there's this little forked organ. So if you piss off the caterpillar and you keep poking at it and don't leave it alone, you keep doing this like a nasty in-law or something, to keep trying to get your attention. Eventually, it might stick out this, it's called an osmeterium. And then you'll notice some kind of an odor, maybe a fruity or maybe an off-putting kind of a rancid odor. And it's thought to be a chemical defense, discouraging predators. So anyway, so this pissed off caterpillar, I guess, is extending its osmeterium in this photograph. We got pretty good numbers of these as well. Now, okay, here's a butterfly with a less rosy story, if you will. Here's one that formerly we did see on our butterfly counts, but now we haven't seen it in some years. It seems to have disappeared. So this belongs to a family of very small butterflies. They're called gossamer-winged butterflies, the Lycaenidae. And this group of Lycaenidae are called coppers. And this particular one is called a tailed copper, Lycaena erota. And its host plant, ribes or currants, perfectly common at the Beacer. Wouldn't you say, John? And yet the butterflies now, we have not seen them since I think 2016. We used to see a few, and here's the numbers, and they just seem to have zeroed out. And now we haven't seen them in years. And you can't tell me it's because the host plant's gone, because there's plenty of food. So the host plant is necessary, but not sufficient. So we don't really know the reasons why we don't see these anymore. You can find them elsewhere, but we've yet to see them at Beacer in the last, 8 years now? Yeah. So I want to share that as well. It's a mixed bag. Here's one, it's a happier story. The California hairstreak, or Satyrium californica, also a lycaenid, small gossamer winged butterfly with these delicate little spots. It's doing pretty well. And that's good news, because in many places its numbers have come down and they've been documented to be declining. But the ones in our population, at least until the fire, right? At least I can say that, have been doing pretty well. And here are our numbers to back that up. And the adults may be found taking nectar on frangula or coffeeberry. Many of you probably know coffeeberry. It's a pretty common chaparral or understory shrub. Comes out in late May, early June. Great place to find these hair streaks, just hanging out. I'm even more excited about this one. This is called Sylvan hair streak, and it looks a lot like the California hair streak. There's some small differences, but this one has really declined around most of California, and it's limited to the West Coast, especially. However, at the BCCER, we have had, I think, many years, the national high. So I'm bragging. I got bragging rights. We found more of these than any other counts, and I think there are about 350 or 400 butterfly counts nationwide. So that's that's a significant thing. So they seem to be doing well, and they depend heavily on willow. They're extremely specialized in willow, and I'm hoping that when the park fire came through, they were hunkered down in thickets of willow along the creek, and they were okay. But we don't know yet. We won't know until next year, probably. So that's the Sylvan hair streak. And it particularly likes the stuff that I want to call Indian hemp in the Cannabinaceae. Yes, it's some kind of a cousin of cannabis. I don't know if it makes the butterflies high or not, but they're strongly attracted to it. I can promise you that. Another species of note, I think, is this one called Waterville's blue, or Plebeius eukaryoides, and its host plants are lupins, perennial lupins. For example, lupinus, I think this is albifrons. Realize there are over 80 species of lupins in the state of California. They're not easy, but I think this one, John, you can check me, might be albifrons. And it seems to respond well to periodic fire. So I want to bring in the whole topic of fire, and maybe that prescribed burns or occasional burns can promote fresh growth of the host plants, and so promote butterfly populations. It's not bad. It seems to be a good thing. So our numbers also have bounced around a good deal with the Waterville's blue. Pretty. Here's a different family. This is actually the largest family of butterfly, the Nymphalidae. The brush-footed butterflies, which includes the California tortoiseshell. And this is the variable checker spotter, Euphydrius chalcedona. Pretty black, medium-sized thing with little chalk-colored spots all over it. And here's an adult that's actually on the larval host plant. and that's the orange monkey flower, Mimulus aurantiacus. So they too are specialists, and in a lot of cases, the larvae are capable of detoxifying what seem to be toxic compounds. Okay, iridoid glycosides will be a class of compounds that are mostly toxic, except for a few butterflies and other insects that can render them harmless, like this one. It eats the pipevine, and the pipevine is thought to be largely toxic to almost all of us. It has something called aristolochic acid. So to add insult to injury, not only do the butterflies consume it freely without injury, but they sequester it in their bodies. And now would-be predators are sickened if they try to eat the butterfly. I guess they're poisoned by the same acid the plant was using to protect itself. So the butterflies are co-opting that.
Is that?
Yeah, and I think it's a different class. I think you might check it. I think it's a class of compounds called iridoid glycosides, which again are toxic to most animal species. Yeah. So don't eat these, but not that anyone's done. Right? Yeah, they're not good to eat. Don't put them on your cereal. Don't do it. Well, for that matter, this one also, I think people are probably even more familiar with this. But the larvae, of course, famously eat milkweed in the Apocynaceae, which has got all kinds of compounds. I think these are cardiac glycosides. They're actually heart poisons. Yeah. So most monarch butterflies come from caterpillars that have eaten this stuff and sequestered it. Not all of them. Interestingly, some monarch butterflies came from caterpillars that didn't sequester it, but they look exactly like the other ones. So predators might do well just to leave them all alone. I wish I could say we've been seeing lots of monarchs. I can't say that. I'm sorry to say. We always want to see them, and if we get a few, we're lucky. If you really want to see monarchs, you all probably know where to go. You go to the coast between November and February, and you can see good numbers at Santa Cruz, Natural Bridges State Park, Los Osos. There are various places where they congregate. They have a very interesting migratory cycle. Here's a monarch sitting on an, I think that's Euryops. I think that's South African, but hey, it's okay. It's perfectly happy to do that in the Monterey Peninsula. All right, I have a little bit more to say about California tortoiseshells. I have a few slides that document outbreaks of these butterflies, which is very unusual. Most species of plants and animals, numbers tend to stay around some kind of equilibrium from year to year. Most of the time, they're kept in check by their natural enemies, which could be birds, but they also could be tiny parasitoid wasps. Well, the California tortoiseshell doesn't seem to be kept in check, and it's known to undergo periodic, I'm going to call it outbreaks, where the numbers take off. And it sounds like Jennifer and some of us have had a chance to see this. So it's really fun. Yeah. They ignore those rules. Then we're not doing that. So I'm calling this a mass outbreak and migration of the California tortoiseshell. Also in the nymphalidae, it's a medium-sized butterfly. Yes, I have some in those specimen drawers. You can see afterwards. Well, I was aware that they underwent these cycles. And wow, in 2001, I was working at Sage Hen Creek, which is north of Lake Truckee, of Truckee, sorry. Doing some work out there, and I came across stands of tobacco brush, Ceanothus velutina, on a hillside. Okay, fine. It's got this resinous quality and quite fragrant aromatic stuff. But what really caught my attention was right next to this was a bare naked stripped tobacco brush plant. And there was hardly a leaf left. I thought, what has happened to, then I realized, oh, there's an outbreak brewing of tortoiseshells, probably, but I'm here at the wrong time. So gosh darn it, I missed it. So these were right side by side north of Truckee. And this bush is pretty much stripped bare. So the caterpillars have eaten all the, there's no planting going. They just ate all the food in the cupboard, gobble it all up. Here's a close-up of the pupae or chrysalids of the California tortoise and some petioles with no blades attached anymore because they pretty much ate everything. So I thought, well, I missed it. But that was in 2001. The good news is, much more recently, there really was another outbreak and there was a chance to see them, see the butterfly, the adults. Yeah, so here we go, Jennifer. This is the one I saw from 2019. So Ken, what I'm going to try to do, it may not work, I want to switch to that video. While we're doing this, I'll just say that we became aware in our house of this outbreak of butterflies thanks to local television news. And as soon as I heard there were a lot of monarchs flying, I thought, ha, there aren't a lot of monarchs. That's BS. I'll bet you I know what they are. And it turns out I was right. And the next day, the television, bless their hearts, they said the same thing. There are swarms of monarchs flying around. I said, no, there isn't. That's actually really disrespectful because the monarchs are not doing that well.
Okay.
The Gulf Fiddler, yes, we are supporting them. They would not be in California except that we plant um, passion vine, right? They're artificially subsidized by us. And if we didn't plant the passion vine, they would have nothing to eat. So thank you very much for supporting the Gulf Fritillaries. I'm thrilled. Okay, can people see that? Don't clap yet.
They can see it at home.
Can they see it?
They can see it at home.
Yes.
Yes.
Look at that.
So this is thanks to my wife, Kristen Malis. She's the one who I couldn't get my camera to capture it, but she captured. It's the only time in my life where I can honestly say I saw millions. There were millions. It's like the whole mountainside was shimmering. I'm not kidding. It was, and this was last in peak. So we go back to the PowerPoint now.
Let's try.
You know,
Should we play it one more time?
yeah, let's play it one more time. Thank you. One more time. Otra vez. This is most of the way up. Yeah, this is most of the way up. We're approaching the summit. Nymphalis californica. So this is also called the California tortoiseshell. And it's one of the few that undergo these mass outbreaks from time to time, periodically. So this was a recent, well, 5 years ago now. And there are other, so they're periodically, again, this species is notable because it undergoes these, I'm going to call them outbreaks, whereby populations are not kept in check by their natural enemies and they explode, which illustrates one of Darwin's principles. Quite interesting. Okay, and at the top of the mountain, those of you who have hiked up probably have seen this sign with a wonderful photograph. And I want to acknowledge it celebrates the California tortoiseshell, which does occasionally come out in large numbers. Have you spotted any winged wanderers along this trail? Okay, good. But I want to focus on this text, and I'm going to be persnickety now. Occasional large population fluctuations of California tortoiseshells arise in Lassen Volcanic National Park. So far, so good. Particularly fond of nectar from tobacco brush and manzanita, off the rails. Large populations can eat themselves out of house and home. So the adults, they're sipping nectar from various sources, but it's the larvae that are going to be hammering the host plants like Ceanothus velutina, the tobacco brush. They're the ones who are, if you like, doing the damage to plants. But the adults sipping a little nectar does nothing. So I think this is a little bit off. We'll have to write to the superintendent and get it straightened out. But I think this part's fine. Mass movements often occur as tortoiseshells abandon defoliated areas in search of more abundant food sources. So if you eat yourself out of house and home, what do? You leave. You get the hell out of there, and then you go eat something else out of house and home. And that's what they seem to be doing. They locally defoliate and strip the leaves off of many, many thousands of bushes, and then they go somewhere else, and they can do it again. So it's not exactly sustainable, except that they keep moving from one place to the other. And occasionally, in some years, like 2019, we'll see these huge numbers of these butterflies. And people call them monarchs, which is kind of sad. But they are California tortoiseshells. So I wanted to share that. It's amazing.
Just going locally then?
And so they are moving locally, but they can also travel some distance. So they can go even to the high Sierra in pretty good numbers. They're strong flyers. And I saw them on, what's today, Monday? Yeah, on my bicycle yesterday. I was up at the burn scar, the park fire, up at the reserve, and they were flying around by the dozen, California tortoiseshell. I said, this is great. So we may have another outbreak year coming, in spite of the fire. Here's a bank of snow. This is August, but still snow, and you can see the butterflies are flying over and even landing on the snow. That doesn't work very well if you don't produce internal body heat. You end up like this. I think I finally just felt sorry for the butterfly, just scooped it because you're paralyzed. It's so cold, you can't move. So it's a bit of a bummer. Here's a group of them congregating there close by. A wonderful thing, really to be celebrated, I think. All right, I did want to turn to this a little bit more serious message, and this is the title of fairly recent publication in Science magazine titled "Fewer Butterflies Seen by Community Scientists." That's, I think, all of us across the warming and drying landscapes of the American West. Okay, it's a topic of concern, and this is where again our 4th of July butterfly counts, sponsored by NABA, the North American Butterfly Association. These are where they've come in because our data have been put to use. So this map of the Western US highlights as regional counts that are included in the study, including our very own. Very happy to see that. It's one of those dots. I'm not sure which one, John. It's one of those dots, I promise you. Here's a list of the North American Butterfly Association sites with 10 or more years of data. And I've highlighted this. This is ours, Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve. I want to say too, here in that rightmost column, it says change. That's supposed to be an index of long-term change in butterfly populations. If you look at ours all the way over, I think it's 1.006. That's actually not bad. So we've lost some, but we've gained some others. So overall, we're doing okay. But you can see some of these numbers are less than one, and some other numbers are more than one. Okay? I think that's what that's supposed to mean. It's ever so difficult to take all these data and winnow them down and get a message. There's so much, what do you call it, signal to noise. There's so much noise in this. As you can see here, it's very difficult to say what's really, really going on. So here's some examples that are right from this paper of population growth rates and examples of annual trajectories. And I'll just focus on this upper right one, which is the California hairstreak. I showed you a picture of it. And there are 3 panels for each of these species, as you can see. And the first one is the North American butterfly count data. And you can see how it bounces around from year to year. Again, how do you make any sense out of that? There's so much noise. The next one is actually Art Shapiro, and he's one of the lead authors on this paper. And the last one, iNaturalist data. So overall, for most of these species, there has been a long-term downward trend for most of them. That's the real message here. Here are 3 other species. Okay, so the authors attempted to beat this into submission and tie it all together into a single graphic, which is difficult. Here's what they've done. They created this axis here called difference between fall and summer warming. So they're looking especially at autumnal warming as a real problem for plant-feeding insects like butterflies. And on the y-axis is the rate of change of butterfly density. And what they argue is that with increased fall warming, sound familiar? Increased fall warming, butterfly populations seem not to do very well. Why? Well, it seems for one reason, they're out of sync with their host plants. It's difficult for them to time their life histories with their host plants when temperatures are disrupted. Maybe the host plants develop too quickly or dry out too quickly for the caterpillars to eat them, for example. That seems to be the message here. But I think we can appreciate that autumnal warming is a real thing. I mean, think of the weather recently. I know it's cool right now. I realize that. So that's my main message from that part of this story. And I think that wraps it up. That's an old picture from Monterey Bay of my daughters. And Jared, I don't know if you can hear me, but I want to acknowledge and thank you for having me tonight, and Altacal Audubon Society and Chico State, and of course, the BCCER. John, I think, there you are, John. You're right there. Director Eli Goodsell, Paul Maslin, Sterling Mattoon, Don Hankins, and actually many others. And that's the end of my talk. Interesting. Here's one from Mike Ashlock. Do you think monarchs could be losing population due to European paper wasps? Interesting question. Well, we do have the Polistes diminulis. Those of you who watch wasps have noticed that it's a little like a ring-necked Eurasian pigeon. I think it's come in the last 15, maybe 20 years, and it seems to have displaced a lot of our native paper wasps. So it's a paper wasp. and it's got a familiar black and yellow pattern to it. I mean, it seems to do very well in suburban and urban situations, like so many introduced species. And I think that they're generalists. I think that the females are out hunting and they take caterpillars and they'll take anything they can get. I'm sure they would take monarchs, but I don't know that they would single them out. I'd be reluctant to say that they're the reason monarchs are having a hard time. I'd be reluctant to say that, but that's a very interesting question. Dawn, mostly I see a decline. Yeah, that's disheartening. Well, yes, it's not all bad. We have our hero, our Sylvan hair streak, which seems to be doing pretty well. There is hope. The tortoiseshells seem to be doing okay. It's not all bad, right? But we can do better. And this is Mike Ashlock. Thank you, Mike. Tell us about the Gulf fritillary. So we got a question earlier about them. Do they overwinter as a chrysalis or a cocoon, or do they come north? That's an interesting question. I think that they can overwinter locally as long as temperatures don't get too cold. So they're very much a tropical kind of a denizen, and their close relatives are almost entirely tropical, or at least subtropical. If winters are mild, they can make it, I think, through a Chico winter, or at least a Sacramento, or definitely a Bay Area winter. You will see them flying in January in Berkeley. It doesn't quite freeze there, so they can make it. But remember that we're subsidizing them when we plant passion flower, otherwise they would not be there. So I don't think they migrate far north and travel. And now there are other species of butterfly that do. We have one called the buckeye that seems to come in periodically, and I have some of them to show you folks a little bit later. So we have our resident species, and then we have some that come in every summer. And of course, the monarch famously goes back and forth between the coast and inland. It's unusual that way.
So question about,
Yes, please.
so on Beeser,
Yeah.
sorry, the eggs. How do butterflies overwinter? So
Right.
since that fire burned all the cover, all we have now is little basil sprouts, little sprouts
Yep.
from the ground,
Yep.
from the ceanothus, but all the other.
Yeah.
So what's the hope for the butterflies that were there?
Yeah, I'm afraid a lot of if they were existing as eggs or larvae or pupae, they might have gotten burned up. So then it comes down to recolonizing. But what I saw yesterday with all those tortoiseshells gives me hope because they're flying all over the place. And I'm sure females will be looking for fresh sprouts of ceanothus and they hit them with eggs.
So they'll leave the eggs over the winter, and then in the spring they'll hatch.
Well, then they would have to hatch and then they'd have to grow and eat a lot of food and develop. It depends on the species. So some of these, like the mourning cloaks or the tortoiseshells, overwinter as adults.
Okay.
So you will see the same butterfly, and they live for months, 8, 9 months, some of them. You will see the very same butterflies, all tattered and ragged in the spring. They'll come out and they'll fly around for a little while. So it actually depends a lot on the species. The tiger swallowtails are pretty much going to overwinter as, I would say, pupae, but the adults will not be overwintering. So it really depends on the species, how they overwinter. That's a great question. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, yeah. Did you have a? No. Yeah, yeah. Let's. Thank you so much. The question was, I think, are the relationships between butterflies and birds? And so I would answer that, yeah, butterflies are part of what sustain insect-eating birds.
Particular ones, certain species relating to each other.
Well, I would say maybe the reverse is that there's some butterfly species that seem to be avoided by birds, famously the monarch. I mean, actually, it's a pretty tough, it's almost like it's made out of plastic. If you were to pick one up and squeeze it, it can take a lot of squishing and squeezing as if a bird handles it and then decides it's no good to eat and then discards it. But I don't know about birds, at least here locally, that specialize on particular kinds of butterflies. I would say scrub jays and flycatchers, the black phoebe, they'll take whatever they seem to catch.
They'll eat a butterfly or
Yeah. Well, I think that the flycatchers, I imagine they would respond an airborne insect and they would dart out and they'd hawk and they grab it and come back. Less so the larvae, but I think the gleaners, Biolophus internatus, what are those things? Cute little titmice. Yeah, those little guys, or wrens, I imagine, or nuthatches or gleaners, and they're combing through all the little tiny crevices of bark, and they're probably taking larvae and even eggs. They must have really good eyesight, any sort of insect life. So I think that they're gleaners, and they'll take the larvae and then the eggs rather than the adults. So it probably depends on the kind of bird. Yeah.
In spring, the oaks will, when the oaks just start, there are thousands of larvae, which are incredible food. So the warblers come in and they're eating the larvae. Which larvae are they? They're in the oaks just before they start to leave out and when they're leaving out. Are they a moth or are they?
Yeah, most of those are going to be various kinds of moth, what we call moths.
That they just love. I mean, one tree will have to, 10 different plus warblers. Just
Fantastic.
on all of them.
Yeah.
So they're making be very small, better eating.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So that these really do sustain bird life. And we need to care about, obviously, these butterflies, right, and moths, because they sustain birds and many other predators. It really matters hugely. If they're not doing well, the birds and the bats aren't going to be doing well, right? So I would say our oaks, the valley oaks, yeah, they're covered with fresh leaves, and most of these are going to be moths. And yes, it's nice to know they're sustaining a lot of wildlife, including birds. Definitely. I don't know, again, that they distinguish. They'll take whatever larvae they can find. I guess warblers are very good at hunting them. I suppose that's true. Yeah, I worry about that, though. If there are fewer of them, I worry about that. Yeah. Yeah.
So we plant a lot of plants in our yard to support butterflies, honeybees, and all that.
Cool. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're in a hard time finding milk.
Yeah.
Where do you find that plant that attracts, the monarchs and the swallowtails
Yeah.
that eat the milkweed?
So
We call it beetle.
did you want to plant milk? Yeah. I'm going to suppose that Floral Native Nursery, before it got burned anyway, would sell lots of milkweed. But does anyone know Floral Native Nursery, Trish?
That's what we're about you guys, the native nursery.
It's on the north.
Definitely not.
It's on Meridian, but I've heard it got burnt. Did it get? I'm sorry, that's false. So maybe Floral Native Nursery. Have you been to Floral Native Nursery?
I know where it is. I haven't watched it grow.
I would.
Really grow like that.
I would call them. I don't know that they sell milkweed.
They definitely grow like for stuff. Yeah. Project, sure.
I would try that. Yeah. I would suggest Floral Native Nursery because they're dedicated to, well, native plants.
Okay.
And you said you said you wanted to support swallowtails. Is that what you?
Yeah, this the monarch and the other type of butterflies,
Mhm.
the food that they would eat.
Yeah.
When they come through the spring, you want
Yeah.
to plants.
Yeah.
For the summer.
Yeah.
They would come.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, back to the tiger swallowtail, they seem to do very well. If you leave the city, you find fewer of them. They seem to thrive. And I'm thinking it's all these willows and sycamores and ash trees that are so common. They seem to do extremely well there. So it's nice to know that you are supporting them. Yeah. You said, what about tortoiseshells? Well, I don't know that you're going to really succeed in growing tobacco brush. I don't think it's really going to work. I don't want to discourage you, but I think you actually have to have an appreciable quantity of the host plant before you're going to attract a female's attention and really get a colony going. But you can also support the adults.
Get a lot of the. Which is a lot of little spots over here.
Not hair streaks or skippers.
The little brown butterflies have the silver on its.
Well, maybe a buckeye.
Well,
Okay.
except come to our master.
Thank you for not spraying herbicides all over God's little half acre. They use plantains, plantago. not the banana planters, of course, but the ones in the Plantagenaceae, which are really common in lawns and vacant areas. So they use those, the larvae. They feed especially on those introduced and native both plantains. So if you don't spray like crazy to control weeds or whatever, you're actually supporting probably buckeyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're quick to find them too. Yeah, good. Well, then you're probably doing something right, I suspect.
See the butterfly.
Good. There's lots of good things we can do. Again, you can plant native plants, cut down or encourage people to cut down on rampant use of pesticides, which include herbicides and insecticides. It's really sad that they're so heavily used, and we really, really don't need to use that much at all. That's just hard to change. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Region, coastal area
Yep.
where the monarchs have become real dependent on eucalyptus, which are definitely an introduced. There's a big argument against clear cutting eucalyptus at one point. There's still much discussion about that.
Wasn't that interesting? Who would have thought that the Tasmanian blue gum would be the monarch's best friend? Isn't that weird? And yet the monarchs seem perfectly happy to use them. So I would say if they're using them, there's an argument for leaving them alone. I would say, or at least some of them, right? Of course, historically, they must have used probably oaks or maybe pines historically, but they seem to have happily adopted the blue gums. I know, isn't that weird? You're in this kind of a quandary. Do you take them down or not? But if you do, the monarchs have less of a place to roost. So that's an argument for leaving some blue gums. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah. By the way, I think they seem to be flourishing in Australia, and they didn't historically live there, but I hear that they're actually doing pretty well. The monarchs, and maybe they're using blue gums there. The roost, I mean, of course. Yeah. Interesting question. I do have specimens to show people if I don't, however we want to do it, people can come up and look or whatever. I got those cream colored swallowtails somebody asked about. I got some of them. Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you. Are we? It kind of shuts out.
Hit stop and.
It shuts out the people at home.
Yeah. So thank you those that are at home. And next month we have the member slideshow. So looking forward to seeing you then. And thank you for signing in.